Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another Sales Hacker podcast. Today, we are featuring two phenomenal guests. We have Pete Kazanji, founder of Modern Sales Pros, and Ali McKee, the CEO and founder of Stick. Guys, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hey,
Hi, guys.
All right. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about how to build sales content that actually works in 2018. As you guys know, there are companies that are pouring dollars into creating sales content, and a lot of it is just not that effective and it's not that great. And today we're going to break down why that happens and what to do instead in order to accelerate your sales cycles, enable your reps, and ultimately, let's be honest here, increase those win rates and get those dollars flowing in. We got to make that money, baby. We got to make that shkaro. So, so Ali, why don't you take us through today's agenda and let the audience know what they can expect to learn on today's webinar?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with kind of going through the pros and cons of sales decks, the latest controversial topic in sales. And then we'll go through, dealing with sales presentations, kind of some of the best practices, and then talking about where we think this is going in the future. And we'll end with some Q&A. But first, want to just draw the connection between, you wrote this article a little while ago in Sales Hacker, and so this is, if you're looking for like really tactical tips and examples, this is a great resource, and we'll be referencing some of this stuff. But really, the purpose of today is just to have an awesome conversation with this crew. And with that, let's kick it off with intros.
Awesome.
Pete, tell us who you are.
hey everyone, I'm Pete Kazanji. I'm the founder of Modern Sales. Modern Sales is a community of sales operations, sales leaders. It's 5,000 people nationwide. So it's probably the largest sales operations and sales leadership community in the United States. Essentially, it's an online community where people kind of geek out on all topics of sales and sales operations. So that I founded a company called Talent Bin that was a recruiting software company that was acquired by Monster World in 2014. And before that, I was a product marketer at VMware. So I have a background in making very pretty slides and hoping that salespeople present them correctly, which doesn't always happen. So we'll get into that.
Awesome.
Cool. I'm Ali McKee. I am also obsessed with this problem of visual communication. My background is originally, I was a studio art major undergrad, and started my career, as all good oil painters do, as a management consultant at Bain, making way too many slides and seeing just how kind of visual communication in business was broken, and have really started Stick as a tool based really for sales and marketing teams to help them communicate with their customers more effectively with visuals.
Awesome. It's a great story on your background too. I didn't even know you were an oil painter. That's cool. So yeah, if you guys haven't met me before, I run digital marketing at Sales Hacker. I'm a music producer turned marketer turned geek and all that fun stuff. I worked on some pretty big client campaigns back in my agency days. Then I moved on to Pipedrive, pretty well-known sales CRM company, and now I'm having fun over at Sales Hacker. So enough about me. Let's get into today's presentation. I do want to reiterate to the audience that if you do happen to drop off because you have to go somewhere or you miss something, not to worry. We are going to send you a recording of the deck and today's presentation. And also subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on SlideShare, because that's where you can get all the follow-up information if you don't like waiting for the email follow-up. So all this information will be available post-webinar for you. So Ali, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. So, sorry, I'm having some issues with there we go. So, as we talk about kind of the role of sales decks, I know, Pete, you've been a big proponent of the importance of the sales decks in the sales process, particularly for early stage companies. You want to kind of talk through some of the key ideas of why they've been important in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why sales decks are helpful, they're helpful if used properly. and they're helpful if done properly. And so the problem associated with that is like, in order to have them done properly, it often takes somebody who's like being intentional about them, which every company doesn't necessarily have. So it's definitely a two-edged sword. Like you can use them as a crutch and it's not great, or alternatively, like you can use them as supporting visuals that back up a really consultative, like, discovery based and consultative based sales conversation. That's what you'd like, right? Where it's essentially like visual framing to help people understand what they're talking about, or when they ask a question, you want to answer it with a better visualization as opposed to just like talking at them with no visual. So like that's the best scenario that you could have, but it's definitely a two-edged sword there. So I'm a proponent insofar as like I've always been heavily invested in making good sales decks for my sales reps, but making sure that they also can use them appropriately, as opposed to just it being kind of like story time in kindergarten where they're just like talking over the slides, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. The other thing too that's so important, particularly now, is like there are more and more buyers involved in each deal, right? And so the average, it was like 4 people 5 years ago, and now it's like 7 to 8. Right. And so, one of the things I've seen is that if you don't have content that actually passes your message along, then your deal is essentially a game of telephone.
Yeah, I had that just yesterday. Yesterday morning, I was on site at a prospect, and the prospect was super pumped up about what we were doing. It was like, all right, we're gonna make this happen. I just gotta run this by my DM. And then was like texting me later. It's like, hey, do you have any slides? Like I'm putting together something. And so I was like, oh yeah, of course I do, here. And I flipped it to him I did a little bit of customization, put their logo in there, and then flipped it to him on DocSend. And he like texted me back and he's like, oh my God, this is sick. This just saved me 30 minutes. And like now I can get this done, as opposed to like having to put a bunch of slides together. I was like, yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Awesome. Hey Pete, we have a question for you. You mentioned that there's this problem of like, sales managers, VPs of sales, directors of sales, they make these decks, the reps take them in. And like you said, there's not really a good transition or handoff of showing and coaching these reps of how to take these decks and how to use them. So in your experience, have you spent time with reps teaching them the right way to use these decks and present them and all that?
Yeah. Like for sure. I always look, so I'm a lapsed product marketer. Right, like essentially right now I'm just like I'm an overblown account executive for my current startup, because that's like the stage that we're in as like from a founder seller standpoint. But my background is in product marketing, so I just consider anytime we like release product or we have like a new persona that we're addressing, my brain immediately goes to like, okay, cool, we have to collateralize this, right? Like we conceive of the fact that like here's a new person who we discover that. So my company's called Atrium, and somebody gave me feedback the other day, like, Atrium is really useful when you're a new sales manager and you have bad historical data to understand performance in the sales org. This is a great use case for you guys. I was like, oh, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about the fact that like when you're a brand new sales manager or sales leader, you don't have historical data. I should make a slide. And so what I did was took the existing stuff that we had and then refactored that into a new slide that has a headline that says like, new sales managers love Atrium, blah, blah, blah. And so anytime there's a new like thing, like whether it's a new product or a new persona or what have you, you want to think about collateralizing that. Now the problem is that like managers and directors aren't necessarily going to be thinking about that, because like they're fighting fires day in, day out. So that's why having the responsibility of either product marketing or product management, or maybe even like CS can oftentimes do that, because they have to collateralize new products anyway from a support standpoint, but like the screenshots can be used for the same. So first collateralizing, and then making sure that like it actually gets to people, like, oh, we updated the master deck and then it was updated in DocSend or HighSpot or whatever. And then even beyond that being like, and here's how you present it. And here's the talk track associated with it. So like I for sure do that. But as you kind of just heard, it's a lot of work, but it's got to be someone's job, right, to do it. Because otherwise you're just going to have people like making stuff up or like you spend all these engineering resources to make new product, and then you don't collateralize it, and then you don't make screenshots out of it. So like, what was the point?
Right. Yeah, makes total sense. And I guess that kind of answers another question that just came in. Do you guys recommend having a secondary deck in addition to your main product demo? And if so, how do you use those secondary decks as ammunition?
In terms of, I'm assuming you mean like presenting versus reading?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we can, it's a good transition into what are the cons of sales decks, right?
Let's do this.
One of the top ones is the fact that reps end up reading them because it's really hard. They say like, okay, we have all this content, now we want to have all this text in here. But the problem is when you have a word wall slide, one, the rep is either reading it or your prospect is reading it and they're not listening to you, right? And the point of a presentation is actually to connect with the prospect more than it is to deliver the facts, I would say. And then you have the pre-read, and then they can go back and pass it along or whatnot. But I think the biggest lever that you have there is just the amount of text and the amount of content that's on the slide.
Yeah, so to kind of follow up on that question, one of the things that I really like to do is like you have the deck that you present, and maybe that's so actually there's a gentleman named Jeremy Donovan who does sales strategy at CV Insights. He's freaking awesome. He's like, the sales strategy whisperer. He's like one of the biggest participants in modern sales, and he was talking about this the other day on this thread in modern sales, talking about like decks. And he's like, yeah, we have this like standard 10 slide deck for CV Insights. It's really just used for discovery and like visuals on the conversation, but you can send things after the fact. And so I do that as well, where like I have a master slide deck that's like, I don't know, like 100 slides. It's like absurd, right? But you don't send that. What you do is you remix it. You're like, oh, okay, cool. These are the things that we talked about on the call. Like they have an overworked sales operations organization, and they have like a new sales leader, and they have a sales enablement person who's looking for early indicators of problems in the org. Okay, cool. So we need to have like the feature slides that are in there and then the persona slides. Okay, cool. Here's a 20 slide rendition that is like remixed to them. And then you like shove that into DocSend, flip them the hyperlink. And like now, or actually what I do is I put it into DocSend space. I'm a really big fan of like these concept of like deal rooms, if you will. And like you've created this collateral that's almost like a memorialization of the call. And then they have that themselves to like then go and run with. But it's like customized to the stuff that came out in the call.
Right. Right.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons why we can actually flip ahead to kind of in terms of building decks well, some of the things that we're talking about that make it really hard is that that 100 slide deck is like a ton of content and it's hard to prioritize. I think like that's something that we could all do better at. That's like sending a 10-page or 12-page thing rather than a 80-page thing. And then even on individual slides, like not having just a data dump of everything but rather like really focusing on what you actually want to communicate. Word wall thing we addressed. I think also, people are like bored by a lot of the one-way decks. And I think one of the big themes that I've seen is this shift from, and this was discussed on this Modern Sales Pros thread as well, but like this shift from, I'm going to pitch to you my 20-page story that I expect to entertain you, and then you'll be dying for my product, right? Like that's not how it goes, because your prospect has already seen that story, if you're doing a good job, on your website. So like that's why they called you. That's why they signed up for whatever you're selling, and they want to actually have an engaging conversation. They don't want to be force-fed this slide 1, slide 2, slide 3 thing. And so I think that's changing pretty quickly.
Allie, to the last point that you have there on personalization means go rogue. We have a question from Marty. Let's see. It says, it's from Tomas. He says, how far do you actually go to tailor your decks to the buyer persona you are presenting to?
It depends on who. It depends, right? It depends on how big is the deal. Like obviously there's opportunity cost to your time, so you don't want to be spending a ton of time customizing a small deal. It also depends on sort of the persona and the type of company. So some, if you're selling into an SMB, you're not going to be customizing nearly as much as if you're selling an enterprise deal, right? Like enterprise companies expect to see customized slide decks, because that's the way enterprise sales still works. You know, and it just depends. There's always a trade-off.
You can also, I mean, there's always opportunities for templatization and what have you. So like to the extent that you know what your personas look like, and maybe you have like your different buckets of ideal customer profiles. So like use Atrium for example. Like there's a couple different personas that care about us. Like if we're talking to an early stage startup that doesn't have a sales operations function, then a lot of the stories around like, hey, this is kind of like sales operations in a box, and like you're a sales leader and you know you don't have time for building all this reporting and paying attention to these metrics. Don't worry, Atrium will do it for you. And so like we have a couple slides that are like talk tracks on that, that I could just know going into that call, like, oh, okay, cool. This is like a 50-person like organization. They got like 10 sales reps or whatever. They don't have a sales ops person. Like you know that data from like being on LinkedIn or what have you, or like when it came through the inbound funnel. So like you can do a little bit of tweaking there. Obviously you can do like basic things like put their prospect logo on things or whatever. Or if you use something cool like stick, like you can change the like all of the color scheme to match their colors. But even like beyond that, like you can do, there's low hanging fruit opportunity that keys off of the pre-call planning that you do.
Yeah.
Right. So like you do your pre-call planning, you're qualifying them on like, you know, LinkedIn or on their website or in Datanyze or whatever. And then like, oh, okay, cool. I know that you use Marketo and I know that you use this based on your firmographics. And so like maybe we customize the deck predicated on that. Right. And so to the extent that that's something that happens frequently, then you just templatize it. And then that way you look like, you know, you look like hot shit because you customize that, but it actually didn't take that much time.
Mm-hmm. And we have a couple of
awesome takeaway there, Pete.
We have a couple of examples teed up for you guys to in a few slides here. The problem with linear decks, man. I want to skip ahead. This is a meta webinar. But anyway, we can have some examples to show you guys exactly what we're talking about here. So
yeah.
In terms of, you know, again, the kind of recapping some of the things we just talked about, but like having a cohesive narrative is really important. And that can be, you know, that can be an send ahead deck that's a flip through that is 20 slides, or it can be just kind of a text outline. But the point is, and you know, Pete, I've learned a lot from Pete, your first round article on this, but the importance of like having that really crisp narrative.
Yeah.
One of the recent pieces of research that I loved was DocSend remixed their pitch, and they had their first pitch, and then they redid it kind of using a storyline, and they had 3x completion rates for the story, right? Mm-hmm. So like this actually matters in that you are able to continue to engage your prospects. The other thing, my big problem I'm trying to work on is like getting more visuals into sales collateral. I think, you know, there's lots of research on how visuals make your stuff more persuasive, but the most important thing, it's not about being pretty, it's not about being cool, it's not about like wowing them, it's about communicating clearly.
Yeah.
Having a clear Venn diagram if there are 3 overlapping elements, or having, you know, 3 icons with your feature set to like show these are the 3 that we want to talk about, rather than, hey, here's our feature list, what do you think? You know?
Yeah, I think this is, so after TalentBin was acquired by Monster, I wrote a book on sales for founders called Founding Sales, mainly because like I didn't know anything about sales when I started selling at TalentBin, and like made just like epic like amounts of mistakes, and then eventually figured it out. But one of the things that I talk about is that like any collateralization is usually going to be better than nothing. Right, just like blah, blah, blah. And I think you kind of see this with some of the explainer videos that people have. Like you've probably seen the explainer videos on websites where it's like pencil drawn, or it's like, you know, it's like cartoons or whatever. It's not Michael Bay, right? It's not like a bunch of explosions and like high production value, but it's like it communicates the concept, right? So when Ali was saying like, oh, you gotta have a Venn diagram, I'm like, yeah. Like, actually, I think there's a slide in here somewhere that actually has that, where it's like, yeah, even if it's just like a pencil drawn thing, that's better than nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what ends up happening is a lot of organizations, they index off of the sort of marketing collateral that they're used to seeing, are from places like Oracle,
Right.
Salesforce, or like, and these organizations have like tons of designers and like people like me when I was a product marketer at VMware. It's like the product marketing person does the words and then hands it to the corporate marketing person who does the images, who then hands it to da-da-da, and then hands it to da-da-da. And like, so like you don't have that, so that's fine. You don't think you have to reach the level of like spit shine that Salesforce or Oracle or whatever has, and then because you know you're not going to get there, you just like stop and you don't do it at all. Like having something is better than nothing.
And I would add to that, it's actually a secret weapon, because the problem with that beautiful collateral is, guess what? You can't change it. So if it looks gorgeous and you hired a design, congratulations, but literally you can't change anything because you don't even have Adobe installed in your computer.
Yep.
So like having like that, you know, and you want to balance, like you want it to look professional, but it's not about the polish. It's about actually the fast iteration, and are you really listening to your customer? Like when I think about personalization, even to the last point here, it's the best kind of personalization is just to say, hey, I heard you. Like these are the 3 things we talked about, and I actually listened to you, rather than, look, isn't this deck really cool? We just had a designer do it. You know, like that's, you go so much more far, particularly in the early stages.
Yeah, and to the point about templatization, like oftentimes what you can do is you can do like low-hanging fruit templatization, where like even if you just have like a nice template that has your logo and maybe you have like 3 variations of it, like this is a slide that has screenshots on it, and it has our logo, and it has like this area on the right where we put text that explains the screenshot. And that's one type of slide. And then another type of slide is one where we just have like a big image in it, and it has like, you know, text underneath of it. And so even if you just have like 3 of those at any given point in time, you're like, okay, cool, I need to explain this thing. What's the type of slide? Oh, I'll use the screenshot slide for this. But at least it looks like better than starting from 0. And it also reduces the friction on you, like, oh, what's the layout gonna be? And this is the sort of stuff that like Stick really helps with, by just making it such that like, oh, okay, cool, like here are the different kind of like visual conceptual slides that are useful for these different use cases. But like you can do it on your own a little bit as well, even if it's just as basic as like, make sure the logo's there on every slide with a hyperlink. Like, I mean, actually, the Sales Hacker Deck's a great example of this, right? Yeah. Make sure there's a logo and like the slide's the right color.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think making sure that, you know, you're not like overthinking it, but you know, we almost think of it as like, Pete, I've talked about in the past, like it's like a Mad Lib, right? It's like a visual Mad Lib, right? So rather than just, you know, because if you're just letting your reps go rogue and it's like screenshot, whatever, like they may not have a call out. And the whole point is to have a screenshot plus a call out. So if your template has screenshot, now what's the call out? It forces that clarity of communication again.
Oh, I should have a call out for this. Yeah. Thank you, Ali, for designing this template this way.
But like it sounds so stupid, but it's true, right? Like we're all moving so quickly. It's like, oh, I'll just dump this in, and you know what's important, but your prospect doesn't. And and the other thing, it's important to remember, particularly with SaaS, like your prospect doesn't care about your product. Your UI is not that beautiful. Like no one cares about it as much as you do, right? Yeah. So how do you help them through it and guide them through it rather than just dumping it on them? To the personalization point, I think another kind of pitfall is it's like, oh, we've got to start from scratch every time, right? Ideally, what you want to do is you want to set up your organization, whether you're, you know, if you're in a product marketing function or a sales leadership function, you want the narrative to be consistent. Like, what problem are you actually solving? And yeah, that flexes in terms of the detail, but like, it should be consistent. And I've seen a lot of companies, they're like pitching a different thing every single time, and that gets really confusing. And then your biggest source of growth is customer referrals. And if you're pitching a different thing to every single person, then no one knows what to call you, right? So making sure you're starting with the core of the narrative, you're using visuals rather than text word walls, and then kind of personalizing on that outer layer as much as you can. Pete, do you want to talk us through kind of like, this is from your, founder sales, like, what are the key elements that go into a good sales narrative?
Yeah, so can you go back a slide?
please.
So, I mean, I think that this visual here is really helpful because a lot of times, again, this is Pete with his product marketing hat on, my product marketer hat. Like a slide deck is just a visual textual manifestation of like a story that you're telling, the same way that a talk track is just a textual manifestation of a story you're telling that eventually turns into like auditory output. The same way that like, you know, a video would be a different manifestation, but it all kind of comes back to the core story, if you will. And so a lot of organizations will like, they think about the product, like I need a sales deck. It's like, no, you actually need a sales narrative. And then what you can do is you can make a deck and you can make an email. You can actually make a bunch of SDR emails and you can make talk tracks and you can right? But like first you need that story. So if you flip ahead, please. And there's different versions of this. And I think actually, Ali, it's your Sales Hacker article talks about the different permutations of this. Is that right?
Yeah.
What's the name of that article? So if people want to like Google it and they can kind of like
the sales deck on Sales Deck. So if you just go to saleshacker.com/sales deck, I think it should come up. And this is one of the three that there's like the CXO deck, the budget holder deck, and the practitioner deck. And this is the
yeah, so, and I think that the reason why Ellie wrote that article, and that everyone who's listening should like go and like read that article later, not now, is that
stay.
Watch us. There was this so Andy Raskin, this guy who was a marketer at Zuora, had this deck. And he, like a good marketer, branded it like the world's greatest deck, which is like pretty awesome. But what it was all about storytelling, super high level. It's like a CXO sort of thing where like you're talking to the CFO, you're talking to the CEO, like he or she is like 50, 60 something years old, doesn't know like anything about your tech. And it's more just like all you're doing is pitching a vision. And so generally speaking though, like those aren't the conversations that you're having. Like maybe if you're like a senior partner at like Bain, and you're going into like, you know, Safeway and you're like, Instacart's kicking your ass, dog. Here's like what we have to do about it. But like we as reps, like we're not having those conversations. Like typically what we're doing is we're talking to DMs who are way down the, like they actually have the pain point. And so this guy right here, this frame, and so by the way, like the highfalutin CXO narrative, that's like fantastic if that's your sales motion. It's just a fancy sales motion that's less common. So if you show up to a budget holder, like if you pitched me when I was managing like 30 reps at Talentbin and Monster, and you showed up and you gave me some like highfalutin like visionary thing, I'd be like, get out of here! What are you doing? Like just tell me what the problem is that I have, because then I will agree or disagree that I have that problem, right? And then indicate to me the cost associated with it, and then indicate to me why probably the way that I'm going about it right now sucks in some regard, and like the cost associated with that suckage, right? And then indicate to me like what has changed that makes it such that we can get rid of that suckage, and then show me how your solution does that, right? And so like that right there is like cool. You can see how it aligns with like discovery. We're like, okay, cool. I'm going to ask you this problem. So Gaetano, how many reps do you manage? Oh, I manage like, 20 AEs and 5 SDRs. Oh, okay, cool. So like, how do you make sure that they're on message? That's a lot of reps. I don't necessarily, like, you're probably not listening to their calls all the time. No, I really wish that I was, but I don't have the time to do it. Oh, okay, cool. Well, like, so, I totally understand that you don't know if they're on message, but the good news is that we can record their calls and parse them. And, if they get off message, we can send you alerting on that and indicate that to you. Oh, you can? That's really interesting. Yeah, it's called Chorus. You should buy it, right? And so, like, that sort of arc there is really helpful in identifying the problem, characterizing to the individual, like, the cost associated with it. And at any given point in time, they might be like, yeah, you know what? I don't have that problem because I have 3 reps. And I just listen to them. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. DQ.
Bye.
And like it's totally cool, right? But like so you can kind of see how this narrative arc would align with like discovery in order to indicate, do they actually have the problem that's being solved, and like do they have it, and how the magnitude of it, and then you can get into the meat of like why your stuff solves it better than the alternatives. So that's kind of like, and then you get off, then you get to like the denouement, like, oh, okay, here's our solution, here's how it solves the problem that we just agreed you have it. We just agreed it sucks, right? We just proved how much suckage there is. And so now, here's how we do it, here's the value that it delivers, and here's what it costs. Oh, look how small the cost is as compared to the value it delivers to you. Yeah, you should totally buy. And so like that arc right there, if you have that baked, you can then put collateral around it to then have visual textual manifestations of those different parts.
I think one of the things that you have done really well in various sales decks you've built is like really matching problem to solution, right? It's like, okay, there are 3 problems, A, B, and C. Well, there are 3 aspects of our product that solve it. Solve A, they solve B, they solve C. I think we actually have an example. I pulled in an example from Atrium because this is, there you go. You want to give us literally you have like, okay, here's number 1 problem. Know what metrics to track. All right, now I flip ahead. It's like, oh yeah, metrics are really hard to track. Oh, well, that's so funny because we have a holistic library of metrics, Go back, like, all right, you need to collect the relevant data. Well, we have automatic data ingestion. It's like, even if I know nothing about Atrium, it's like, whoa, this makes a ton of sense. And so even if I don't have the problem myself, I'm like, wait, I know who does because I understand it, right? It goes back to, this is all about like clarity and super crisp communication.
Yeah, one of the things you can see here, like, this is not a pretty slide, right? Like, this is not. This is, what'd you say?
So it makes you want to go skiing, though.
I know, right? You like how there's graduated levels of difficulty there. That was a sales operations person was like, we should really indicate like the level of difficulty for these different things. I was like, that's a really good point. How can we visually do that? How about ski runs? Okay, let's do that. But I get
it, right? It's not pretty, but like I get it. So
yeah. So in this case, like, it's not super beautiful, but at least it like characterizes the problems that people have in doing excellent like metrical instrumentation of their organizations. Is like, knowing the things to track is a pain in the ass. Collecting the data is super broken. Then you got to build all the reporting, and then even once you do that, then you got to pay attention to it. And then once you pay attention to it and identify aberrations, then you actually got to root cause it. All that sucks. You might be doing some of those parts better than you're doing other things, but we would agree that like there's lots of brokenness in there. Do you agree, Mr. Prospect? I do agree, Pete. Cool. And then we flip to the other one, and we're like, wonderful. Well, the good news is this is how we attack this. Boom, 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 boom. Interesting. Sounds good. Okay, here, let me show you how it works. Yep. Right. And so it's very much like tied to the exist. And so that can be done. So can you go back to the pain point slide, Al? So like your solution has whatever these are, right? So like Gaetano, you worked at DocSend.
Pipe Drive.
No, but like before, I thought you said one of your one of the people you worked with was as a contractor was DocSend, right?
Oh, yes. When I was at my age, so like, you did contract with DocSend, yeah.
Yeah, so like use DocSend as an example here. Like, so what are the problems that they solve? Well, it turns out that like having a unified place to like put all your marketing collateral is kind of a pain in the ass, and so most of the time people have it like spread all over Google Drive or like in email or whatever. Okay, cool. Well, conveniently, DocSend has a single place where you can unify all that information and like tag it up and blah, blah, blah. Cool. Well, like, how do you send it in such a way that it's like that whether or not prospects are looking at it? You send it by email. You don't have any tracking on it. It kind of sucks. Oh, well, don't worry. DocSend solves that too. You send a hyperlink. It tracks clicks on that, and then when people are on the deck or the piece of content that you sent them, DocSend is looking at how many slides they look at and what have you, and they're reporting it back to you and putting it into the CRM. So it's like the problem tied to the solution, the problem tied to the solution. So like, what I would say to the people who are listening is like, think about what that is for your solution, or sorry, for the problem cases that your solution solves, and then like what are the buckets that then connect to that. Because this approach that we're doing with Atrium right here is totally extensible to what you do.
Hey guys, we do have a question too from Maria. And this question actually hits home for me in some ways because I've been on demo calls where this has happened. But she says, do you think it's absolutely mandatory if you're on a call or presentation with a prospect to go through the deck slide by slide by slide? Or should you be sensing if the rep is, or excuse me, if the prospect is getting bored, or you can kind of sense that that you're losing them? Should you really ask some type of probing question to figure out, like, what is the one thing you really want to know? And let's just get right to that. Because I was actually on a demo call last week, and the account executive was really, really gung-ho about showing me everything that they do, going through all this stuff. And then I just said, look, I really don't really care about this. I care about this. And I want you to skip right to that. And he's like, yeah, we're going to get to that. But first, let me show you this. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I'm just going to hang up right now because, you know, you basically just said you don't care about what I want. You want to show me what you want. So well, what's your guys' take on that?
So what you're talking about is very common and an indicator, right, that you aren't in control anymore as a seller. You don't get to carry your, you know, have your buyer on a leash. Like, they're the ones in control now. That's the way that this goes. Like, they have control over the information. You're putting so much more information out there, and like you have to be able to work with them to fill in the gaps in their knowledge and really serve as an advisor, not regurgitating, you know, information of every single feature you have. So absolutely ask questions, absolutely make it a targeted conversation. And, you know, I think the best application of a demo deck is really to keep their attention, right? Like, what is the objective there? It's so that they're not multitasking during your Zoom call. It's so that they actually have something to look at when you're, you know, maybe you're in the product, maybe you have kind of slides or visual aids, but the objective is to keep them engaged. Their attention is what you're going for, not anything else. And so if you're talking about crap that they don't care about, guess what? Like, you just lost their attention and they're checking their email in the next tab, you know? Yeah. So I think just stay oriented around the objective and be a human being and just try to help them solve the problem.
Yeah, and probably what was happening with that rep, I mean, usually what you get when you have essentially like a rep who's acting like a glorified like Teddy Ruxpin kind of like talk over on the deck, it's largely just because they haven't done a good job of discovery.
Yeah.
Right. And it might be because that like discovery talk track, like, here are the questions we should go through. By the way, here's how we can answer a lot of these ahead of time by going on LinkedIn or, you know, DataFox or, you know, whoever, in order to like get data ahead of time. Like, hey, I know that you use Marketo. I know that you don't have a marketing operations person. Or I think that you don't have a marketing operations person, because I looked on LinkedIn, I didn't see one. And then, like, so if somebody does, if the rep or your reps don't have that checklist, then you're not necessarily setting them up to exhaustively answer that, in which case they're treating every call as the same, right? And so, like, so that's the first step. And then the second step is, like, once you have that information, then they need to be able to, like, do that mad libbing sort of thing, like, oh, okay, cool, this slide's not going to be pertinent, this one will be pertinent, etc. Like, I'll just jump ahead, right, to the things that are relevant. So normally, the way that we present Atrium is, like, we have a couple like mental model slides that just like frame the concept, and then so the way that we do that is to do discovery first. Ask questions like, hey, saw XYZ, seems like this might be your situation. Do you have these problems, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, cool. Yeah. So, like, hey, cool, that's really great. Thank you for that. You know, that's like 5 or 10 minutes or what have you. I want to show you I want to tell you a little bit about Atrium such that you can understand, like, how we approach these things. And then, like, it's not going to be too many slides. It's going to be a couple. I just want to, like, set the mental model, right? So, like, bear with me. And then we'll start freestyling, right? But, like, what I need from you is I need to set your mental model. So, like, we're both coming from this. And so, like, yeah, that slide on the left there is like a good example of that. It's like one of the slides that we use. It's just a screenshot from Andy Grove's high output management book, where it just talks about like, you know, looking inside the machine and instrumenting the machine. And so he talks about, Andy Grove is of course the CEO of Intel, and he was one of the, you know, he was the father of OKRs, objectives and key results. And so like we have a couple slides that kind of help people think about that, like, oh, it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like sports instrumentation, it's kind of like this, etc. And then we start getting into like the actual nuts and bolts, but not in like a slavish way. When we get into the nuts and bolts, it's more just like, okay, these are the 4 slides that I really want to make sure that like you have the mental model. And then we're going to start getting into like the freestyling stuff where we may be jumping around between slides, or like jumping into the product, jumping back to slides, etc.
Yeah, I think that's so important, right? Is the objective really is to make sure that they get the big picture. And I think one of back to the Zora deck that we keep picking on, but so what ended up happening, for those of you all who are familiar with, you know, the greatest sales deck I've ever seen, and it was like, welcome to the attention economy. And it was 20 plus slides. You know, it was basically a click through, right? It was marketing collateral, a great story. As in a demo, you would not, no one I sell to would sit through that, right? Because I would lose their attention. But what I would do instead is I would take one visual, and this is one of Zora's visuals, to capture like what is the change that I am trying to talk through, and I would tell the same story in a fraction of the time, oriented around like one clean visual. And in their case, it's like, look, the economy is changing from delivering products through all of these different channels to customers, and now like the subscription economy means you have one subscriber and everything rolls around them. And then you're able to sell Zora through a really simple visual, rather than like, okay, we slide on slide 13, you still with me? Yeah, right? And then what you can also understand like what they don't understand about it. Because some people are going to be like, I don't agree with that. That's not how I see the world. And you want to be able to understand, why don't you see the world that way? How can I help you see the world that way? Because if you don't see the world that way, then like this isn't a fit, right?
Hey Pete, we have a question for you from Kenneth, and Ali, feel free to weigh in on this one as well. But I think this definitely applies to the context of enterprise sales. That situation or scenario that you mentioned, where you know product marketer X will create this sort of messaging framework, and then it gets passed on to communications person, and then they refine it to where it aligns with brand guidelines, and then finally it gets all the way down to the rep, and the rep is like, whoa, like this stuff doesn't really align at all to the problems that we face in the sales process. So what the real question is, how do you navigate that? Like, how do you go back to those people and say, look, this is garbage, this is not what we're seeing, like this needs to be totally redone? How do you navigate that as a rep?
Yeah, I mean, so when I was at VMware back in the day, before I was like a seller, so a lot of product marketers kind of come out of consulting, haha, Ali, you know, and so like a lot of it's like, hey, we're creating these pristine slides in a lab. You know, it's like James Bond and Q. Like we're making these slides. They're top secret. They're, you know, it's high octane weaponry. And then like we push it out to the field, and it's like, don't you mess with it. That's perfect, right? And so I think the way to, and so that often doesn't work. And so the way that you solve that is you got to make sure that like the people who are like, it's just a feedback loop, right? Where the messaging gets deployed to prospects and we see how it resonates or not. And actually, this also goes all the way back up to product management, because product marketing is usually like product marketing done well is the communication of value propositions that you already knew the problem existed when you made the decision to build the feature or the product. And the reason why you knew it existed is because product management went out to the market and was like, hey, it sucks that like your sales reps don't have a single place to go look at their content and then send that out with instrumented hyperlinks. Do you agree? And the sales manager was like, yeah, it totally sucks. And then DocSend was like, we're gonna build that, right? And then they went and they got their engineers and they built it all. And so then product marketing is literally just the re-articulation of that like pain point conversation and solution. So conceivably, like the product marketing should be tightly aligned with product management. But if it bounces off the prospect, then like we need to iterate. And so the problem oftentimes is like how many layers of telephone there is going on there. And so probably the way to deal with that is like as a sales rep or as a manager, what you would want to be able to do is push that back upstream in the form to like product marketing or product management. Like, hey, by the way, they're not going to buy because we're missing this feature right here, or because our pricing is screwed up as compared to this competitor. Oh, really? Yeah, because look, see these close lost reasons on the opportunity objects that we have been recording? And I'm showing you that like when we lose in competitive deals against these competitors right here, as again, as modeled on the opportunity objects, these are the primary objections. Oh, by the way, here are the recordings from Chorus. You can listen to them, right? And so I think what has happened historically is that people don't do that, and instead like the reps will just go rogue. And so what you want is you just want a tight feedback loop. Like if it's not working, cool. Like let's capture that, push it back upstream, iterate upstream, and then push it back down to everybody else because it's not working for you. It's probably not working for all the other reps as well.
Yeah.
Right. So just like driving that feedback loop is really important. And then in the short term, from a tactical standpoint, then for sure, like you're gonna want like you're shucking and jiving out in the field, and so like you're gonna want to iterate there, but like not just on your own, right? Like you want to push that information back up into the organization.
That's one of the biggest problems I've seen too, right? Is like sales inherits the 80 slides from marketing. They're like, what the hell is this? This is in the clouds. This doesn't relate to my prospect at all. Screw it. I'm gonna start from scratch. Right? The problem is you have 50 reps doing that. And so you're telling the market 50 different oh, and by the way, those reps are spending 20 hours a week making slides. And that's not your job. Your job is
not their job. Yeah.
not your job. And it's happening all the time. All the time. So I think, if you're a sales rep listening to this and you've rolled your eyes at marketing deck, like the best thing you can do is work with marketing to actually make it better, or at the very least like provide that feedback, but rather than just kind of giving up and saying I'm going to do it myself.
Well, also from a sales management and sales operations standpoint, I don't want to, like, you're an AE.
Yeah.
Meetings, bro. Not based on like how much time you spend in PowerPoint. And so if I'm a sales manager and I've got 7 reps and I'm measuring how many like customer facing meetings or like how many emails they're sending or how many like Zoom meetings they're having or whatever, and I see this like divot and like this is happening across many reps, like I'm not stoked on that. So like I as a sales manager, like I want to root cause the problem. Okay, cool. What's going on here? Oh, I'm doing these slides because the slides suck. Okay, cool. I get that the slides suck. Cool. Let's fix that. Let's not have you fix that. Let's capture that as a bug, as a feature request, and maybe I as a sales manager would do it, or maybe like I'll pull in sales enablement to help me with it. Hey, hey Frank, hey Susie, sales enablement person, can you help us with this? Because like my reps are like doing this, and I want them doing prospecting. Like if you're not meeting with a customer, you're supposed to be tending your pipeline. If you're not tending your pipeline because it's all up to date, I want you to be prospecting. Like 20th on the priority list is like arts and crafts in PowerPoint. And so like, let's pull somebody else in, because like as a sales manager, I don't want my reps doing that, right? But I do want to solve their problem.
We have so many claps and applauses happening in the chat box here. Kenneth just said, "This is gold. My team needs to hear this." So well done, guys.
The other element we can't forget either, right, is it's arts and crafts on crack, because sales people are not designers. That's not what our job is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not only are they wasting their time, but it looks awful. In all of the interviews, I've done lots and lots of interviews about this problem with salespeople, and the term that keeps coming up is Frankendex. It's like Frankenstein. It's like one slide from the keynote that the CEO presented, and then one from 3 from marketing, and then 6 bullet point. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
15 different fonts, all different colors. Like, it's a disaster. So let's leave the arts and crafts to not us.
Yeah.
And just to kind of add to that, one of the again, like, I'm a mean sales manager, I'm a mean sales operations person. It's kind of how I roll. Like, it just is what it is. Like, ask any of my former reps or like or managers who work for me. But like, like, when you leave that as an excuse, so it's kind of like SDRs who don't want to call, right? Oh, I'm doing research. No, you're not. You just don't want to call right now, right? And so what I want to do as a sales operations person is make sure that you have like all the prospects you could possibly want ripped out of like Discover.org or like Zoom Info, shoved into Outreach or Sales Loft or whatever, because I remove that gate for you. And the same is true here. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, I have to refactor this deck. No, you don't. No, you don't. Right? If the deck is problematic, cool. But I don't want you to use that as an excuse to not be doing self-prospecting or not managing your pipeline. Like, if you're doing arts and crafts and I look at your pipeline and 50% of the ops haven't been interacted with in 2 weeks, like, I'm going to throw my laptop out the window, right? And so I, as a sales manager, would like to, I'm going to throw your laptop out the window, not mine. I, as a sales manager or sales operations person, want to remove that block for you. I don't want you to have this excuse that you should be doing this thing, this artificial thing, like, hey, this is the critical gate on me having success. So if you actually believe that, then like, okay, cool, let's talk about that, and I will take the action item to solve it for you. But I don't want you solving it. Like, trust me to solve it. It's my job as a sales manager, a sales enablement person, or product marketer, and then I'll come back to you. But in the meantime, don't solve it yourself, because like, your job is to be managing that pipeline.
Awesome. Hey guys, we have about 15 minutes left. Let's try to plow through the rest of the slides because you do have some more questions left, and we'll try to wrap this up on a strong note. But good discussion so far.
Well, I'll finish. I'll just kind of, we've talked a lot about the personalization piece. I think the three main ways you can, or places you can personalize, are one, your opening. Make sure you can play back those discovery calls. To agenda, making sure that it's actually tailored to what they care about, not yours. And then, if it's a longer presentation, mid-presentation, use their logos, customize materials, whatever, to kind of keep them engaged. Ways to do this. Awesome. Pete mentioned this earlier, talking about using the same visuals and kind of remixing, applying them differently to personas. This example from Atrium, same exact visuals, like the slide is already created. It's just plugging in different text to truly tailor that based on who you're talking to.
Yeah, you have sales manager in the first example versus founder in the second example.
Different personas, similar use cases. The problem, like the product solves similar problems. It's just like the messaging is just like tweaked a little bit, and like, you do the research ahead of the call, you nuke one slide and you prioritize the other, and all of a sudden you look like a hero.
Right. Tactical example of the templatization you mentioned before.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
One of the kind of experiments we've been running too is customizing branding. So presenting it in their brand rather than yours. Something to experiment with if it interests you. So I want to end on kind of this section of where this is going, right? We've been talking about kind of the standard sales deck, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And part of it is because things are changing really quickly. So on one hand, with the shift from, just SaaS models, right? You went from having this one big presentation, and once it was done, like, you had $2 million in the bank, contract was signed, like, good to go. That's not true anymore. It's SaaS, it's as a service, it's recurring revenue, and so the second you drop the ball, your revenue drops as well. And what does that mean for your communication? The second piece, the MarTech 5,000 slide, now up to MarTech like 7,000 slide, that got released this week. And it's insane. It is absolutely insane how many companies there are in this industry, and just realize, you think that you're just reaching out to one person and you can't understand why they're not responding. It's because they have 7,000 other companies competing for their attention, and the bar is so much higher as a result. So overall, I think just where I see this going, having talked about this problem with a lot of people, is just overall a shift from a presentation to a conversation. So making sure that you're actually set up. You can see this is my kind of old world, new world, simple visual to communicate it. But going from, all right, here's my polished PowerPoint presentation. Designers have done it. Marketing has done it. Everyone's signed off, ready to go. Now go perform this for the customer. That is over. It's now this constant stream, starting at the top of like your LinkedIn status updates that people are sending, inbound is coming in because they see, oh, he's talking about a problem that I have, and I can see it because it's like a slide that I can literally see. I don't even have to click on a link. That all the way through your customer onboarding, like it's a constant thing now.
Yeah, and even back to Pete's point of the discovery going wrong when you're in that scenario when you're in a presentation and discovery wasn't conducted properly. Another thing to even just add on to that is a lot of times you'll have a champion at an organization who's really like interested in a tool, and then they might go to their VP of marketing or their head of sales and they'll be like, hey, I got a demo set up for this tool that I think would really benefit us. I would love if you could jump on. And now that person has zero context of all the things that may have happened in prior conversations.
Yeah.
So this new world example that you're showing here is far more relevant in even that scenario versus that old world where, you have a VP of sales walking into a presentation when you're just seeing all this stuff for the first time. And it's like, all right, I'm wasting my time here. I just need to get to the point.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why, like, I recently and I'm sure there's other alternatives, but I recently discovered DocSend's functionality of spaces, and I just love using it because, like, I hate the term customer journey, but all right, I'm going to use it. Like, every customer journey, like, kind of has its own path. Like, oh, you care about this? Here, let's pull in that piece of content. And oftentimes, what ends up happening is like that just ends up in this like ungodly long like email thread where you're like, oh, is it an attachment? Is it a hyperlink? Like, what's going on? Whereas if you're just like, oh, that cool, let's put that in our workspace together, right? And so that way, when like that other stakeholder comes in, you're just like, oh, did you want to catch up? Cool, here you go, right? And like you just have like everything, like, oh, okay, cool, right? So like one of the things that we do, like when I do a presentation to a prospect, I'll then like take the deck that's been customized and then I'll like refactor it just a little bit, like, okay, cool, like let's trim out that, and like pull it down and then boom, shove it into the DocSend space. And then that way it's now like a thing that can be used, like, oh, okay, cool, I need you to talk to this other director of sales. No problem. Cool, like I have that deck customized because like the work that we did on this call has now been persisted off into this collateral, which then is persisted off into this like, space object that's tied to an opportunity object, right? So that way, like you're capitalizing on all the work you're doing, as opposed to like every time you do that work, you like throw it away.
Right.
And you're almost like you're building the story as you go along for them, rather than dumping the PDF on them in the first call, right? And it's having super quickly, but going from Jacob van der Kusch says content is the new outbound call, right? Like that's actually, if you can put out a visual that captures like the problem that you're trying to solve, and it's something that they care about, and it's actually adding value to them by keeping them updated, like that's like the foundation. That's where it starts, and then everything else flows through, and you're consistent rather than, hey, I'm going to sell this person one thing, sell this person the other thing. Also, in terms of social stuff, like images get tweeted more, and LinkedIn, it's lower reach because of the algorithm, but higher engagement typically I've seen. And that's something that I did it even this morning in prepping for this webinar. Just plopped one of the slides from this deck and shared it as a status to like let people know what's going on. I'll just whip through a couple of blog stuff, like lots of research on now. I think the ratio you should be thinking about if you're writing on Medium is like one visual per minute of reading. So if it's a 3-minute read, like you should have 3 solid visuals in it, and then that helps boost engagement. The $1 million slide concept, which I've written about in the past, but I love, wanted to call out this drift example. is a more recent version than the Zora example. But I think they've done a really good job, obviously, of saying, look, again, here is our value proposition in one slide, and whether or not you want to buy drift, like, it is valuable for you to know as a potential prospect, like, what's going on in the market. And the reality is, like, the market is shifting, right? Like, think about your buyer here. Do you really want to take them through all those steps? No, you don't want to take them through all those steps. Like, no one wants to go through all those steps. You want to just have a conversation and, like, get qualified and just sign up for drift, give it a try. Yeah, I do. I'm happy now. Just simplifying it and then using that. You can put a visual like this. This has been shared as statuses, blogs, in demo decks, I'm sure, like, having that be a consistent, almost card that you can play in various situations. And then that, it kind of recaps customer success as well, like the ability to just kind of crystallize rather than a big, long story on customer success, like having these as almost cards of like, hey, this is a company that found a lot of value in this. This is why. Oh, and by the way, this is the feature of our product that like really helped them find this value. Is it like you? Great. Here, like, regardless, you can learn from it. And then just to kind of direct you all to more tactical examples again from that piece that we wrote earlier on sales decks. And yeah, that's it in terms of content for the day. We have time for a couple of questions.
Yeah, we do. So by the way, for everyone in the audience, you can go see that example that Ali mentioned at saleshacker.com/salesdeck. There also are some people asking about the recorded version of this and the slide deck. Yes, there will be, once again, a recorded version of this webinar being sent to you after, and you can go subscribe to us on YouTube so you don't miss that. We're going to post it there. And also the deck, we're going to upload the deck to our SlideShare account. I think Pete had to jump off, so take care, Pete. But Pete, you still there?
I think I am. I don't know.
There you are. I wasn't sure.
I don't know how to use computers.
All right, so Pete's still here. All right, good.
My bad.
All good, man. So we got a couple of questions. So one that I wanted to bring up real quick was from Tony. He wants to know, in your experience, guys, is there a difference between how you treat decks when you have inbound leads versus outbound? And that's a good one. From my experience, I've sold SEO services before, and pretty much all my leads in that time of my life have come from referrals. But at Pipedrive, we had so much inbound traffic and so many inbound leads that we didn't even have to do decks. It just got right to the presentation. Like the sales process there was like so much inbound was coming in, gets routed to reps, and it gets right to demo call. So I'm not sure how this would apply, but Pete and Ali, if you guys have any thoughts on this, feel free to elaborate.
You got something else?
I mean, I would just say that it's typically more discovery, or sorry, more like research work, and in outbound versus inbound, right? Like in inbound, it's a little bit more like, here, this is what we heard, or this is why you wanted to talk to us. Is that correct? And you're confirming their interest. Whereas outbound's like, hey, I know about your business. This is what I've learned about your business. Help me better understand your business. Now, is this something that we could solve together?
Yeah, I think the one thing that would be, so I think outbound versus inbound is definitely going to be different in that regard, because like you can hypothesize. Well, yeah, this is actually interesting. So like, I guess predicated on how like tricked out your marketing automation stack is, you probably should be able to understand like what content they've been consuming. So like you could go into HubSpot or Marketo or Eloqua or like whatever, Engagio, and be like, oh, okay, cool. What pages have they been on? So what you could understand is like how educated they are in that regard. And then moreover, I guess, so like if somebody just came inbound because like, and they don't know anything, but they just like hit your website, did a demo request, and then that's like it, then that's probably like more like you might require more like contact setting, what have you, versus if someone's like engagement score, because they've just been like all over your site and all over all the different pages and what have you, is much higher, then I can imagine that being like, it's just like pre-call planning again, right? It's like, hey, I saw that you've like consumed like 50 pages of content in the last like however long. Don't be creeped out. It's called marketing automation. It's cool. And then they're like, yeah, I'm totally up to date. Okay, cool. Well, like, let's talk about that. Whereas, and then I think the other thing you could do too is like predicated on which landing page they came through. That would be something that like you might like customize or tweak in that regard. And that kind of goes back to the templating and what have you. It's like, oh, okay, cool. I saw that you came through the landing page talking about founders who want to understand sales metrics. Sounds like we should talk about that first, right? Right. So I think that's the way that I would like approach that. So probably, I mean, the response to that is like, it may not require a different deck, but it may require the sales rep to like winnow down and not do, who was the woman who asked the question about like just the world's worst sales call where the rep was like, no, I'm going to let you get to it. I'm going to let you finish. But like, first we're going to get through these slides.
Yeah.
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 Awesome.
I don't think it requires a different depth. It never requires different behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, this is the last question for the day. It's from Lance, and this is a really big one. How do you change the mentality of a VP of sales who does not want you to separate discovery from the demo process, and this VP of sales prefers you to do both at the same time? How do you navigate that?
And I would say,
you have something on that, Al?
What's the challenge? Like, what's the challenge with that? Is it that you feel like you don't have enough information to customize? Is it that you feel like it's too much content? Like, I'm curious as to what the problem is with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
My reaction to that is like, I love it. Like when you can do discovery that rolls into a demo.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
It's like, it's super efficient. Now, that can't always be the case, but like in SaaS land, it's very frequently the case. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the joke, like if you're going on a first date, you don't make it dinner. It's like drinks.
Right.
And you're like, hey, this is going really well. Do you want to get a bite also? Right?
Yeah. So true.
That's good.
That's good. And I think the problem was, so what I've always coached my reps with is like, hey, we're going to start out with discovery. And like, I think the problem is you have to book like 30 or 45. Like if you can, I think usually what ends up happening is like, if you can only get 15 minutes of their time, because otherwise they're like, no way, dude. Then you do that. And like, but then maybe you can roll into the demo. If you can get 45, book it. And then do that discovery, but then if it turns out they're DQ'd, that's cool. Like can them, right? Respectfully, and be like, you know what? That sounds like it's not going to be a fit. I like want to be respectful of your time, and I don't want to like, you know, I can tell you a little bit about it because like maybe you have friends who might be interested in this, but like I don't think it's going to be a fit for you, and like I'm sure you have an inbox full of email. So I think that like generally speaking, like to the extent you can, it's not about combining them because they're not like happening like interleaved like this. It's like the one happens first, and then like once we've gotten through discovery and we're like, okay, cool, we should proceed. If you have the time to do that, you can totally do it. Now there could be scenarios wherein like maybe the amount of time allocated is not enough to do discovery, but that's probably in like pretty heavyweight like sales motions,
right?
Like if you're selling, you know, if you're selling like Stick, or you're selling Atrium, or you're selling DocSend, or you're selling like Chorus, or you're selling like SalesLoft, or like whatever, like you probably should be like, if you have the questions outlined, you should probably be able to handle things in like 10 or 15 minutes, like build rapport, do some discovery, like but if you're selling like MemSQL, or you're selling like Oracle, or you're selling like, you know, whatever, like, okay, maybe like discovery is going to be like a full discussion around like your existing technical stack and like where you're going and what have you. But I feel like that's like a rarer case.
Yeah, I do 20-minute disco demos. I find it's also like more authentic because it's not like, again, this is all inbound at this point, but I basically view it as like a conversation of like, let me learn about you, why you're interested in this. and then I can show you whether you think this actually can help you solve that problem. And much more so than like, okay, I've looked into my database, and according to my database, you have, you can make it much more of a conversation. Like, that's the whole point, right? You're trying to connect with people, and you're trying to actually engage with the human beings rather than, again, dump information on them.
Yeah, rarely have I seen in the marketing side of things that process run smoothly. There was one demo I was on when I was at Pipedrive. We were interested in using a behavioral analytics solution called Balance Exchange. And that rep actually did a really good job of kind of balancing that discovery and demo on the same call, but knowing that to really get to the meat and potatoes of, am I going to really pull the trigger on this, that it's going to require subsequent calls, and he's going to have to, go into his data, and then they're going to want data of ours and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I guess
but that's fine though, right? Because literally all you're trying to do is get that second date.
Right.
And like the goal of that first call is to figure out if this is potentially a match, and then earn the right for that second date, because like they're like, yeah, actually this looks pertinent. You have shown me enough that this looks like this could be valuable to me to resolve my pains and make me look like a hero to my boss. Cool, let's schedule that right now. Do you have your calendar in front of you?
Pete, you haven't been doing this that long, right?
Oh, no muscle memory.
All right. Well, this has been a great webinar. This has been a great way to wrap it up. Pete and Ali, I want you to share with the audience where they can get in touch with you, how they can hit you up, where should they go, what should they do?
Ali?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn's #1 platform for me. I'm on it. Usually do daily updates on this kind of stuff. I also write on Medium on some of these ideas. So eager to hear your feedback and thoughts, and reach out. You can also email me at ali@stick.ai.
Cool. And folks can find me on LinkedIn, of course. And there's sales operations enablement leadership folks who are, looking for peer education and peer support from other sales nerds, essentially, to like solve the same problems that they have. Modern Sales is awesome for that. So you can hit me up on LinkedIn. Ali and Gaetano can attest to that. It's like the biggest group of sales nerds around, helping each other be better at sales nerdery. But it's all sales operations, sales enablement, sales leadership. Unfortunately, no reps because they're talking about you behind your back.
There's no promotional stuff in there, which I love. It's all tactical. It's all stuff that
rules on that. Strict rules on that.
Yeah, very strict rules on that. It's straight up tactical knowledge. And if you're in ops and enablement or sales leadership, marketing leadership, definitely want to check that out.
Yeah, people love it when we drop the boom on someone like being a turd.
You're fine.
Off the island.
Yeah, exactly. And then you guys can hit me up on LinkedIn as well. Just hit me up there. You could also email me if you want, Gaetano@saleshacker.com. Of course, subscribe to us on Sales Hacker. Stay updated with all the fun stuff we're doing, and hopefully we'll catch you for the next webinar. So thank you very much, and we're signing out. Catch you next time. Peace.
Bye, guys. Thanks.